Open your legs. 3 words. That's all it took for Zola Bankston's world to shatter into 1,000 pieces she'd never put back together. She stood frozen in the marble doorway of Kang Jae-won's private bedroom, cleaning supplies trembling in her hands, as the most feared Korean mafia boss in Los Angeles rose from his bed like a predator who'd finally cornered his prey. His shirt was unbuttoned, tattoos crawling across his chest like dark promises, and his eyes, God, those eyes, burned with something that made her thick thighs press together involuntarily. Before we continue, I need to say thank you for being here. Real quick, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. Atlanta? New York? Miami? Chicago? Maybe you're international? I love knowing where my viewers are tuning in from. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because the stories on this channel will keep you hooked. We don't hold back here. Just raw, emotional storytelling that hits differently. Now let's get back to Zola, because what happens next? You're not ready. I won't stop, he continued, moving toward her with terrifying purpose, each step deliberate, measured, until my child is in your womb. Not a request. Not a proposition. A guarantee. Zola should have run. Should have screamed. Should have remembered she was just the maid, just the help. Just another thick black woman who'd spent 28 years being told her body was too much, too wrong, too undesirable for any man to truly want. But Jae-won wasn't looking at her like she was too much. He was looking at her like she wasn't enough. Not yet. Not until every curve, every inch, every part of her she'd learned to hide was filled with him, claimed by him, forever marked as his. You have 10 seconds to leave this room, Zola, he said, his Korean accent wrapping around her name like a caress and a threat. After that, I'm locking the door. And when I'm done with you tonight, you'll understand why I chose you. Why it has to be you. Her hand hovered over the doorknob. Freedom was one twist away. But her body betrayed her, frozen by the weight of his stare, by the desperate hunger in his voice. By 3 months of watching this dangerous man look at her like she was salvation instead of sin. The clock on the wall ticked. 9 seconds. 8. 7. His hand reached past her shoulder, and she heard the lock click into place. Too late, he whispered against her ear, his breath hot, his body trapping hers against the door. You're mine now, Zola. Every inch of you. 3 months earlier, Zola Bankston had been 24 hours away from sleeping in her car. The eviction notice burned in her purse as she walked into the most expensive high-rise in downtown Los Angeles, lying on her resume about experience she didn't have, desperate for any job that came with room and board. The penthouse elevator required a key card she'd stolen from the building manager, but desperation made thieves of honest women, and Zola had stopped being honest the day her landlord changed the locks. The elevator doors opened to reveal a world she'd only seen in movies. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the glittering chaos of LA, white marble stretched in every direction, and standing in the center of it all was a man who made her forget why she'd come. Kang Jae-won turned from the window, and Zola's breath caught. He was younger than she expected, maybe 35, with sharp features that could have been carved from stone and eyes so dark they looked black in the afternoon light. Scars traced his knuckles, disappeared under his rolled sleeves, told stories of violence she didn't want to imagine. But it was the way he looked at her that made her freeze. Not with disgust at her curves stretching the cheap fabric of her dress, not with the dismissive glance she'd grown used to from men in suits. He looked at her like he was taking inventory, cataloging every inch, deciding if she was worth the investment. You're bigger than I expected, he said in accented English, circling her slowly. Good. The last 3 maids were too fragile. Broke too easily. Zola's heart hammered as his fingers lifted a strand of her hair, examining it like merchandise. I don't break easy, she managed, hating how her voice shook. His lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. I know. I had you investigated before you stole that keycard. Zola Bankston, 28, evicted twice in 1 year, fired from your last job for slapping your manager when he grabbed your ass. He leaned closer, his breath warm against her cheek. You're exactly what I need. Strong. Desperate. Invisible to everyone who matters. He pressed a key into her palm, his fingers lingering against her skin. 3rd door on the left is yours. You start tonight. Don't disappoint me, Zola. I don't give second chances. Zola learned 3 things in her first week working for Jae-won. 1. The The penthouse had 17 rooms, and she was forbidden from entering only one, the study with the red door at the end of the east hallway. 2. Every Thursday at midnight, men with guns and expensive suits filled the living room, speaking rapid Korean while Jae-won sat at the head of the table like a king dispensing judgment. And 3. Her boss watched her constantly, his eyes tracking her movements like a wolf studying prey, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. But it was week 4 when everything changed. Zola was cleaning the hallway outside the forbidden study when she heard the shouting. Male voices, angry, one of them Jae-won's, colder than she'd ever heard it. Then came the sound of breaking glass, a body hitting a wall, and silence so heavy it pressed against her chest like a fist. The red door flew open. A man stumbled out, blood dripping from his nose, terror whitening his face. He ran past Zola without seeing her, and she understood then what invisible really meant in Jae-won's world. She was furniture. Wallpaper. Nothing. Jae-won appeared in the doorway, blood on his knuckles, a knife glinting in his other hand. His eyes found her immediately, and for the first time since she'd arrived, she saw something crack in that perfect control. Inside. Now. It wasn't a request. Zola's feet moved before her brain caught up, carrying her past the threshold into a room that stole her breath. The walls were covered in photographs, crime scenes, surveillance images, faces marked with red X's. A massive desk dominated the center, and on it lay documents covered in Korean characters and one word she recognized. Inheritance. Jae-won locked the door behind her, and the sound echoed like a gunshot. 6 months, he said, his voice raw, stripped of its usual cold precision. That's all I have left. He turned to face her, and she saw something she never expected to see in a monster's eyes, fear. My father's will states I must produce a legitimate heir before my 36th birthday, or everything I've built goes to my cousin Min Jae, a man who sells children, Zola, who traffics women like merchandise. His hand slammed against the desk, making her jump. I've dismantled half his operations in secret, saved dozens of lives, but if he inherits, it all comes back. Worse than before. He moved toward her, desperation rolling off him in waves. I need a child. And I need a woman no one will suspect. You want me to have your baby. Zola's voice came out strangled, disbelieving, even as her body responded to his proximity with traitorous heat. Jae-won's hand cupped her face, thumb tracing her full bottom lip with agonizing slowness. I want you to save lives. Meaning. Yours. The women and children Min Jae will destroy if he takes control. His other hand settled on her hip, fingers digging into the soft flesh there with possessive pressure. But yes, Zola. I want my child growing inside this body. This perfect, strong, beautiful body that every other man was too stupid to appreciate. No one had ever called her beautiful. Sexy maybe in dark rooms where shame lived. Thick, with that particular tone that made it sound like an insult. But beautiful? Never. And certainly never while looking directly at her in bright light, with hands that trembled slightly as they mapped her curves like sacred territory. Why me? She whispered, even as her body leaned into his touch, betraying every self-preservation instinct screaming at her to run. My previous arrangement was with the daughter of a Yakuza family. Alliance marriage, politically expedient, exactly what my family wanted. His jaw clenched, and she saw murder flash across his features. Min Jae had her poisoned at our engagement dinner. 4 months pregnant, and he killed her in front of 50 witnesses, made it look like bad shellfish. The baby died with her. Zola's breath caught as his forehead pressed against hers, his eyes closing like the memory caused physical pain. I need someone he'll never see coming. Someone invisible to my world, someone with no connections to trace, no family for him to threaten. Someone strong enough to survive what's coming. His hands slid down to her waist, pulling her flesh against him, and she felt the hard evidence of his desire pressing against her stomach. You think I didn't notice how you look at me, Zola? How your breath catches when I walk past? How your thighs press together when I speak Korean? Heat flooded her face, shame and arousal twisting together until she couldn't separate them. I'm offering you everything, he continued, his lips brushing her ear, sending shivers down her spine. Protection. Money. A child who will inherit an empire I'll spend my life making clean. And every night until my seed takes root, I'll worship this body the way it deserves. His hand slid under her shirt, palm hot against her bare skin. Say yes, Zola. Let me make you mine. Zola's answer came not in words but in the way her hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer instead of pushing away. Jaewon made a sound low in his throat, something between a growl and a prayer, and then his mouth was on hers, claiming, devouring, erasing every gentle kiss she'd ever received with the intensity of a man who'd been starving. He lifted her like she weighed nothing, her thick thighs wrapping around his waist instinctively as he carried her to the desk, sweeping documents to the floor with one violent motion. I need to hear you say it, he demanded against her lips, his hands already working the buttons of her uniform. I need to hear you give yourself to me, Zola. All of you. She should have been terrified. Should have remembered this was a business transaction with a dangerous man. That his sweet words were just manipulation to get what he needed. But when his mouth found the sensitive spot below her ear, when his hands curved around her waist with something that felt dangerously close to reverence, she heard herself whisper, yes, I'm yours. Something shifted in his eyes then, possession and triumph and something darker, something that promised she'd just made a deal with the devil himself. Say it again, he commanded, his hands sliding up her thighs, pushing her skirt higher. Say you're mine, that this body belongs to me, that you'll carry my child. I'm yours, she gasped as his fingers found bare skin, as he touched her in ways that made her forget her own name. I'll carry your child, Jaewon. I'll give you everything. He captured her mouth again, swallowing her moans as he showed her exactly what belonging to a mafia king meant. Hours later, Zola lay tangled in silk sheets she'd washed 100 times but never imagined sleeping in. Jaewon's body curved possessively around hers, his hands splayed across her stomach like he could will his child into existence through sheer determination. There are rules now, he murmured against her shoulder, his accent thicker in the darkness. You don't leave this penthouse without my permission. You don't speak to anyone I haven't vetted. You take prenatal vitamins starting tomorrow, whether you're pregnant yet or not. His grip tightened. And if anyone threatens you, you come to me immediately. Min Jae has eyes everywhere, and the moment he suspects what you mean to me, you become a target. Fear trickled down her spine, cold and sobering. What have I done? She whispered. Jaewon turned her to face him, his eyes burning in the moonlight. You've become the most important person in my world. And I protect what's mine, Zola. With everything I have. The next morning, Zola woke to an empty bed and a black velvet box on the pillow beside her. Inside lay a necklace, delicate gold chain holding a pendant she didn't recognize, Korean characters etched into dark jade. She was still examining it when Jaewon emerged from the bathroom, already dressed in one of his expensive suits, looking every inch the dangerous man he was. It means protected, he said, taking the necklace from her trembling fingers. My grandmother wore it through the Korean War. My mother wore it when she fled to America with nothing but the clothes on her back. He fastened it around her throat, his fingers lingering on her pulse point. Now you wear it. So everyone in my world knows you belong to me. Zola touched the warm jade, feeling the weight of history and expectation settle around her neck. I'm just your maid, Jaewon. This is too much. His hand caught her chin, forcing her to meet his eyes. You stopped being just my maid the moment you said yes. You're the mother of my future child, the woman who will save everything I've built. His thumb traced her bottom lip. And if I'm being honest, Zola, you're becoming dangerously more than that. Before she could process those words, his phone buzzed. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees as he read the message, his jaw clenching with barely contained rage. Get dressed. We have a problem. 20 minutes later, Zola stood in the red door study, watching security footage that made her stomach turn. A black car had been circling the building all night. Same license plate registered to one of Min Jae's known associates. They were being watched. He knows something, Jaewon said, his voice deadly calm in the way that meant violence was coming. He doesn't know what yet, but he's suspicious. He turned to Zola, and she saw the predator beneath the expensive suit. This changes the timeline. I need you pregnant as quickly as possible. Need the evidence undeniable before he makes his move. His hands framed her face with surprising gentleness despite the hardness in his eyes. Can you handle what's coming, Zola? Because once Min Jae confirms you're carrying my heir, he'll try to kill you. And I'll have to kill him first. She thought about her life before this penthouse, the endless cycle of rejection and invisibility, The crushing weight of being unwanted. Then she thought about the way Jae-won looked at her, touched her, made her feel like she mattered for the first time in her life. "I can handle it," she said, surprised by the strength in her own voice. "Good," he murmured, pulling her close. "Because I'm not letting you go. Not now. Not ever." 3 weeks passed in a blur of locked doors and tangled sheets, of Jae-won's hands claiming every inch of her body like he was mapping territory he'd defend with his life. Zola stopped sleeping in the maid's quarters. Stopped pretending this was just a transaction. Stopped lying to herself about the way her heart jumped every time he walked into a room. But she also stopped ignoring the armed guards that now followed her everywhere, the way Jae-won's jaw tightened whenever his phone rang, the increasing number of men with guns filling the penthouse at odd hours. The war was coming. She just didn't know how close until the night she woke up vomiting. Jae-won held her hair back in the bathroom, his hand rubbing circles on her back, and when she finally stopped retching, she saw something terrifying in his eyes. "Hope, how late are you?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Zola's hand went to her stomach instinctively. 5 days. But it could be stress, the vitamins you've been forcing down my throat, anything. He was already on his phone, barking orders in Korean. 20 minutes later, a woman arrived with a medical bag, no questions asked, no judgment in her eyes as she drew blood and promised results by morning. Jae-won didn't sleep that night. He sat in a chair beside the bed, watching Zola like she might disappear if he blinked, his gun resting on his thigh in a way that should have terrified her, but somehow felt protective. When dawn broke, his phone buzzed. One message. His hands shook as he read it, and Zola saw the monster crack open to reveal something raw and human underneath. "You're pregnant," he said, his voice breaking on the words. 8 days. "It's early, but it's there. You're carrying my child, Zola." She waited for panic, for regret, for the crushing weight of reality to destroy this fragile thing between them. Instead, she felt his arms wrap around her, felt him bury his face against her stomach, felt something wet against her skin that might have been tears from a man she didn't think capable of crying. "I'll protect you," he whispered against her belly, his accent thick with emotion. "Both of you. I swear on my life, Min-jae will never touch you." But even as he made promises he might not be able to keep, Zola's phone, the one she thought was private, buzzed with a message from an unknown number. 5 words that turned her blood to ice. "Does he know you're diabetic?" Zola's hands trembled so violently she nearly dropped the phone. Nobody knew about her diabetes. Nobody except her dead mother and the free clinic doctor who diagnosed her 3 years ago. The condition she managed with stolen insulin and prayers because she couldn't afford real treatment. She'd hidden it from Jae-won, terrified he'd see her as damaged goods, too risky for carrying his precious heir. But someone knew. And that someone was Min-jae. The second message came before she could breathe. "Pregnancy with uncontrolled diabetes kills babies. Interesting choice for my cousin's heir. Meet me, or I tell him how you've been lying." Jae-won looked up from his position at her stomach, saw her face, and was on his feet instantly. "What's wrong?" She couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't do anything but watch as he took the phone from her frozen fingers. The temperature in the room plummeted as he read the messages. When he looked at her, she saw betrayal flash across his features before that cold mask slammed into place. "Diabetic," he said, voice flat. "You're diabetic, and you didn't tell me before I got you pregnant with a child that might not survive because of a condition you hid from me." Tears burned her eyes. "I was afraid you wouldn't want me if you knew I was broke. You think I care about diabetes? I care about you dying, Zola. I care about losing another child because someone didn't tell me the truth." His grip tightened. "How bad is it? When did you last check your blood sugar? When did you last have insulin?" 2 days ago, she whispered. "I've been rationing it. I didn't know I'd get pregnant so fast. Didn't know I'd need to be more careful." He was already on the phone, shouting orders in Korean, and within 15 minutes the penthouse flooded with medical equipment, endocrinologists pulled from their beds, enough insulin to supply a hospital. But as the doctors worked, as they hooked Zola up to monitors and spoke in concerned voices about high-risk pregnancies and specialized care, she saw Jae-won standing at the window, his reflection showing a man at war with himself. "He knew," Jae-won said quietly, not turning around. "Min-jae knew about your condition before I did, which means he's been watching you longer than I thought." He finally faced her, and she saw murder in his eyes. He's making his move, Zola. And he's using our baby as bait. The doctors left at dawn with strict instructions and enough medical supplies to fill Zola's room. J1 hadn't spoken to her since the revelation, hadn't touched her, had barely looked at her as he paced the penthouse like a caged animal plotting escape. It was the silence that broke her. Say something, Zola whispered, her hand protectively covering her stomach where their 8-day-old miracle was growing despite the odds stacked against it. Yell at me, punish me, throw me out, but please stop looking at me like I'm already dead. He turned then, and the rawness in his expression stole her breath. My first child died because I didn't know the mother was being poisoned until it was too late. Now you're telling me my second child might die because you were too afraid to trust me with the truth. His voice cracked. How am I supposed to protect you from threats I don't know exist, Zola? I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't save our baby. The words ricocheted off marble walls, and she watched him catch himself, watched him struggle for the control that defined him. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter but no less intense. The doctors said with proper management, you can carry to term. But it requires constant monitoring, specialized care, and eliminating stress. His laugh was bitter. Stress. While my cousin circles like a vulture and uses your medical history as blackmail. He crossed to her then, kneeling beside the bed, his hands framing her face with a gentleness that contradicted the violence in his eyes. I need you to tell me everything, Zola. Every secret, every vulnerability, every piece of ammunition Minjae could use against us. Because I can't fight an enemy who knows more about you than I do. So she told him. About her mother who died from diabetic complications because she couldn't afford insulin. About the years of rationing medication. Of skipping doses to make supplies last. Of learning to function while her blood sugar levels did dangerous things. About the shame of being sick in a world that demanded perfection, of hiding her condition from every employer because diabetes meant unreliable, meant expensive, meant not worth the investment. J1 listened without interruption, his thumb tracing patterns on her wrist where her pulse hammered. When she finished, he pressed his forehead to hers. No more secrets. No more hiding. From this moment, you tell me everything, and I fix everything. Understood? She nodded. And he kissed her then, deep and possessive and edged with desperation. But the kiss broke when his phone buzzed with a message that made him go absolutely still. Minjae had sent a photograph. Zola's empty insulin vial from the trash, taken from inside the penthouse. With a caption. I have people in your home, cousin. How safe is she really? J1 moved like death incarnate. Within 2 hours, every staff member who'd worked in the penthouse over the past 6 months was assembled in the living room. Security footage pulled, phone records seized. Zola watched from the bedroom doorway as he transformed into the Mafia king his reputation promised, cold and calculating and absolutely terrifying. The mole was a housekeeper named Sujin, a woman Zola had shared coffee with, who'd smiled at her swelling ankles and morning sickness. The betrayal cut deeper than she expected. How much did he pay you? J1 asked, his voice conversational despite the gun in his hand. Sujin's face crumpled. My daughter. Minjae has my daughter. He said he'd kill her if I didn't report on the girl, on whether she mattered to you, on anything that could be used. The gun pressed against her forehead. Where is he keeping your daughter? A warehouse in Koreatown. Please, I had no choice, he took my baby. J1's expression didn't change, but he lowered the gun. Get out. If I see you again, I'll forget you're a desperate mother, and remember you're a traitor who endangered my child. After Sujin fled, his men scattered on his orders, each with specific targets, and Zola understood she was watching the beginning of a war. You're going after him, she said, not a question. J1 turned to her, and she saw the monster fully unleashed. Minjae made this personal when he threatened you. When he put his hands on what's mine. He crossed to her, pulling her flush against him, one hand sliding to press against her stomach where their baby grew. I'm going to kill him tonight, Zola. Not because of the inheritance, not because of the empire. Because he dared to make you afraid in the one place you should feel safe. She should have told him to find another way, to be smart, to think about the consequences. Instead, she fisted her hands in his shirt and pulled him down for a kiss that tasted like violence and possession. Come back to me, she whispered against his lips. Both of us need you to come back. His eyes softened for just a moment. I've survived worse than Minjae. But Zola. His hand cupped her face. If something goes wrong, if I don't make it back, there's a safe in my study. Code is your birthday. Inside is everything you need to disappear, to keep our baby safe, to... She pressed her fingers to his lips. You're coming back. Say it. I'm coming back, he promised. But they both knew some promises were made to be broken. The penthouse was too quiet. 3 hours since Jaewon left with his men, armed for war, promising to return. 3 hours of Zola pacing marble floors, one hand pressed protectively over her stomach, the other clutching her phone like a lifeline. The security monitors showed nothing but empty hallways, and the 2 guards Jaewon had stationed outside her door. But Zola had learned to trust her instincts in this world of beautiful monsters. And every instinct screamed that something was wrong. The lights went out at 2 a.m. Not flickering, not gradual. Just sudden, complete darkness that swallowed the penthouse whole. Zola's heart slammed against her ribs as she heard the guards outside her door shout. Then the unmistakable sound of silenced gunshots, bodies hitting the floor. She ran for the panic room Jaewon had shown her, the one hidden behind the bookshelf in his study, but she only made it 3 steps before the bedroom door crashed open. Minjae stood silhouetted in the doorway, backlit by emergency lighting, and Zola understood why Jaewon hated him. They had the same sharp features, the same dangerous grace, but where Jaewon's eyes held calculated violence, Minjae's held something worse. Pleasure and cruelty. The pregnant maid, he said in perfect English, stepping into the room with 3 armed men behind him. My cousin's desperate attempt at legitimacy. Did he tell you about the clause in my grandfather's will? The child must survive to age 5, or the inheritance reverts to me anyway. He smiled, and Zola saw her death in that smile. Which means I don't have to kill you, Zola. Just wait for diabetes and stress to do what they do best to high-risk pregnancies. Her hand went protectively to her stomach. Jaewon will kill you for this. Jaewon is currently bleeding out in a Koreatown warehouse, betrayed by men he thought were loyal. I had him followed, anticipated his move, turned half his soldiers before he even arrived. Minjae pulled out his phone, showing her footage that made her knees buckle. Jaewon on the ground, surrounded, wounded but still fighting like the monster he was. He's not coming to save you, Zola. No one is. But Minjae had made one critical mistake. He'd underestimated what a woman with nothing left to lose would do to protect her child. Zola's hand closed around the letter opener on Jaewon's desk, the one he used to open envelopes, sharp enough to kill if driven with sufficient force. You're right, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. No one's coming to save me, so I'll save myself. Zola didn't think. Thinking meant remembering she was just a maid who'd never fought anyone, that Minjae had 3 armed men, that she was 8 weeks pregnant and her blood sugar was probably spiking from adrenaline. Thinking meant dying. So she moved. The letter opener drove into Minjae's shoulder before he could react, and his scream of rage filled the penthouse as she ran, not toward the panic room he'd expect, but toward the red door study where Jaewon kept his real weapons. Bullets tore into the doorframe as she dove inside, slamming the door and triggering the emergency lock Jaewon had shown her. 30 seconds before they breached. She opened the safe with shaking hands, her birthday, just like he'd promised, and found the gun loaded, safety off, with a note in Jaewon's handwriting. If you're reading this, I failed you. Don't fail our child. Shoot first. Apologize never. The door exploded inward just as Zola raised the gun, muscle memory from a self-defense class she'd taken